FAVMI presents Unfolding Mental Illness, hosted by Saraswati Suresh.
Hello and welcome to Unfolding Mental Illness, a podcast by FAVMI, Family's Voice on Mental Illness, and which is also the Western Zone of Face Me India. At FAVMI, we believe that recovery from mental illness is not an individual journey, a shared journey involving professionals, families, communities, and our loved ones. Today's episode topic is Recovery is a Team Sport in Mental Illness and explores a powerful and often overlooked aspect of recovery, psychiatric rehabilitation, and the vital role of family in the recovery process. While medication and clinical treatment are important, but true recovery often involves rebuilding confidence, social connections, life skills, purpose, and hope. And this is where rehabilitation becomes transformative. And we are honored to feature MANAV Foundation, one of Mumbai's pioneering organizations in the field of psychosocial rehabilitation for persons living with mental illness. For over 2 decades, MANAV Foundation has championed a holistic approach that combines rehabilitation, creative therapies, counseling, family involvement, vocational training, and community integration, helping individuals reclaim meaningful and fulfilling lives. They believe that recovery happens not in isolation, but in partnership with families playing a central role in the process. And today we are joined by 2 remarkable women who have transformed countless lives. Mrs. Meena Mutha, she's the founder trustee of MANAV Foundation, and her journey began as a mother caring for a daughter living both with learning disability and schizophrenia. Through her experience, she was determined to create a space where individuals could rebuild their lives beyond symptom management, and she co-founded MANAV Foundation in 2004. Her story is one of resilience, compassion, and turning personal challenges into hope for countless others. We are also delighted to welcome Ms. Binaifer Jesia. She's the director of MANAV Foundation and a highly respected mental health professional for over 3 decades. With a master's degree in social work and a lifelong commitment to mental health and rehabilitation. She has been associated with MANAV Foundation since its inception and plays a pivotal role in shaping its philosophy, programs, and inclusive vision. Welcome, Meena ji and Binaifer ji. Thank you for joining us today. And we really look forward to having a conversation with you in the concept of rehabilitation, psychiatric rehabilitation, which you all have started in MANAV Foundation, since we all believe that recovery truly is a team sport. So welcome on board, and we are really humbled that you both have been able to make it today.
Thank you so much for that very warm welcome, Saraswati. Very happy to be here.
Yeah.
Same here. Thank you so much, Saraswati, for giving us this opportunity to reach many more.
So let's start, ma'am. What inspired you to start MANAV Foundation, and if you can tell us a little bit about the journey, from the foundation, from the inception to where it is today.
Okay, well, in 2004, I realized that she is facing a mental sickness. Well, before that, 3-4 years went into panic attacks and outburst and many more things which we didn't realize. I mean, as a mother also, I was finding a changes, but didn't knew that it is going towards mental illness. So the initial times went away from my hands. Well, when I was told to admit her in the hospital and diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, well, label is something else, but she was facing many difficulties. So after her acute hospitalization, doctor told me that you send her to rehab center immediately, don't bring her home. Well, for me, it was a big question. What is rehab center and where is rehab center? So I was, she had some throat issues. So I said, let me put her in the hospital itself. I'll manage with sister and then let me look out for rehab center. So I started looking around in Maharashtra, outside Maharashtra, and many more places. But, when it comes to your own well being or your loved ones, it's not that easy. The kind of rehab centers I have seen, I mean, it was horrifying. I used to cry after every visit. But then one fine day, one of my friends, Suresh Gandhi, told me that why don't, let's see what we can do. And Dr. Machiswala was that time. Since you already have a social work background, why don't you only start? So that was the time, both the things match. Hospital gave the Masina Hospital gave the place, and then MANAV Foundation was started at that time. Well, starting was one thing, but going ahead for lifelong is another challenge. So which was I was not aware. Well, after 3 years again, we were asked to change the place. You have to vacate the Masina. I said okay. Then we were keep shifting to, till date we have shifted to 7 places, and that too literally once we had worked in a construction site also, and once we were handling office at my place and then open place pay and some small banquet hall udhar pe therapies kar rahe hain, that. But believe me, with Binaifer's support and other team support, we didn't stop for a single day from last 22 years. The work was always on. So that was I said, now the team is there, I must, look forward for them. Finally, with this goodwill, you can say, and mouth publicity, it has reached to somebody who was really kind enough to help us to and support us for the space. So now it has become a permanent place for MANAV Foundation, and we are working at this place. So rehab center started that way.
Congratulations, Meena ji. I can understand the journey what you've been going through. Yes, and it's fantastic to hear that you have taken this forward so beautifully, along with Binaifer ma'am and your entire team. So for listeners who may not be familiar, to what exactly is the daycare rehabilitation center that you guys do. So what are the core components of rehabilitation in the MANAV Foundation? What is the model that you guys follow and how it has evolved over the years? And I'm putting another question along with it, is that how does it differ from a traditional psychiatric rehab to what you guys have? Between two of y'all, whoever would like to take it.
Okay. Basically, I think I'll address it by just starting with, a distinction between a therapeutic facility and a daycare center. The point is, yes, although we do work on a daycare basis, we don't necessarily call ourselves a daycare center because I think the connotation of a daycare center is slightly different from what it is that we do. And so, what we do call ourselves is like a therapeutic center, a therapeutic facility that works on a daycare basis. The reason we make this distinction is also because it's very important, I think, for people to understand that it's not a babysitting facility. It's not a service that just provides, a secure sort of premise where you can leave your loved one for the day and then come back. It's a lot more participatory than that. There is basically, essentially, from the minute the client walks in at, say, 9:30 in the morning and leaves at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there is a therapeutic activity ongoing throughout that day, throughout the duration. So obviously we have, a formal structure to the day for each client. But even when there is informal, you know, um, interaction, even when they're not necessarily involved in a particular, activity, even if they're just sitting around and having lunch or having a snack or chai nashta, the space itself is designed and is empowered to be therapeutic. So there are some core values that we have used and that Meena and I were very, very clear about holding on to. And those are, those, in my understanding, is what makes the space a therapeutic space and not merely just a space where, you can leave someone for the day and then come back to get them. I think another aspect is also the fact that, as you rightly said, we involve the family and the caregiver community in a very large way. We'll get into that, I presume, at a later point. But therefore, when you say daycare center, it doesn't necessarily um, relay that there is a lot of participation expected from the caregiver as well, because of the very important role that they play in the process of recovery. So when we talk about the important components of rehabilitation, we as things evolved, we realized the need to actually not just structure, but also put a certain name and a certain face to what it is that we're doing. So when we started the rehabilitation center back in 2005, and MANAV Foundation was registered in 2004. By the time the center started in 2005, we knew what we were doing, but we didn't have necessarily a, let's just say, structure to it. And that structure is what has evolved over the years. So we now recognize that what we have been doing all along and what we are doing, continue to do now, is address the various domains of an individual, of a human being, let's say, that are impacted when that person has a mental illness. So the domains that we've identified are the functional domain, right? So the ability to just function on a day-to-day basis, do things that you and I take absolutely for granted. To be able to get up, make myself a cup of coffee or tea, or go to the market, buy some vegetables, pick up the newspaper, whatever it is. Functional independence is something that is lost when an illness has not been addressed for a long time,
Very small, small things to start with.
which we don't think about, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Those are compromised in different ways and to different degrees in different people. Then we have the social domain. I think the social domain is also one of the most, I would say, severely impacted domains, where, people with mental illness, they actually retreat and they withdraw from any kind of social interaction, any kind of social engagement. And I think that's also compounded by the fact that very often family members or caregivers who don't really understand or know how to deal with the situation, or are very often embarrassed or ashamed because of the prevailing stigma around mental illness, that they don't expose their loved one to very many social situations. So that again gets compounded, and social skills or social, let's just say, even just the desire to interact and to do things becomes less and less, and the person fades, retreats more and more into their own world and into their own sort of universe. So in terms of looking at social skills, in terms of understanding all those related aspects, Then we also have what we call is the cognitive domain. So the cognitive domain takes care of the cognitive functions, right? So to be able to pay attention, to be able to focus, to be able to analyze, problem solve, these are things that we also pay attention to. And then we pay attention to what we also call the mental domain, which is where we use mental domain and the emotional domain, one might say, is a little sort of connected in the sense that it is about developing insight into one's own illness. This is a part of me and it is not does not define me. It is not who I am. And how do I recognize the symptoms of an illness? How do I relate to my own illness? What are the emotions that accompany it? And how do I overcome those kind of obstacles if they are standing in my way? So these are the components that we by and large, address. Yeah, in terms of our model.
Oh, that was a
You
beautiful.
did ask me a few other questions. I'm not sure if I've answered all of them.
Yeah,
If I haven't,
no,
yeah,
I'll get back to it, but I completely, got the entire picture in my mind, the functional, social, cognitive, and the mental and emotional well-being as a
right,
model which you all take care, which are the basic challenges which the loved one
correct,
starts to
correct,
face. And you
right,
did very rightly explain to us that this is not a babysitting facility.
correct,
It is a
right.
therapeutic this thing,
Yes,
which is what was
and it is a stepping stone.
yes,
We make it very clear to our caregivers, also to clients. There are exceptions because of age. Sometimes also chronicity plays a very sort of a role in it. But the point is that we don't want to be anyone's, destination.
correct.
We want people to come, we want people to use what we provide, we want them then to move on. Because our vision is not rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is a means to a larger end. And
Yes,
that end is basically the vision that we see is reintegration back into
into
mainstream in a way that
they become
one may
financially and
determine for
emotionally
themselves.
independent.
Yes,
Very
absolutely.
large. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah. So, so this which you're saying is like a therapeutic place where I send my person from morning to evening. So, how different is it from where I keep my loved one for say 2 months, 3 months in a rehabilitation center? I mean, that was
okay,
one of my questions which I had asked.
right. um Meena,
Yeah,
would
because
you like to address that from a caregiver point of view, I think?
yes, or as a caregiver, if you see ki I will send my loved one for a few months or few days, and then he'll be fine, and then the life will be move on. Life will move on. But that's not the case with mental illness. It's more or less you can say, uh, once every client is different. So when acute stage, after acute stage, and then chronic illness, sometimes just you can say a subtle stage, different stages. At the same time, family has a different pattern of working outside, and nobody is to look after everything. So when they come, we see, the team analyze, evaluate them, and then see what can be done and what. So every client has been made a customized program. So accordingly, we go ahead with that, his or her schedule. We also have a workshop where we, try to see that skill development where we can do. So we have, and also the major part we see because finance is a major issue. So at least some income will come to MANAV Foundation so we can sustain. Because for mental health, when you ask for funding, it's a big challenge I'm facing. Always been facing. So, and किसी को खाना खिलाना है, कपड़ा देना है, it's simple. People do give pani pilao, khana khilao, dawa do. It's not that easy. They feel they look very, healthy and hearty. Why he's not sick? But inside we know, he knows, our family knows how difficult it is. So it's like that. I think I'm moving away from the question, or if you can, add some more questions so I can add to that.
No problem, Meenaji. I
Can I
completely
just add to that? I think
sure,
in terms of
Meenaji.
how a residential facility would be different from what we do,
Hmm.
is the point is that from my understanding, residential facilities also need, I think what they do get is, a certain sort of, there is a certain removal, let's just say, from everyday life, which involves the family, which involves, the other aspects that are very, present in everyday life. So what happens in a center that works like ours on a daycare basis is that there is a lot of information, there is a lot of opportunity that the individual gets to continue to interact and engage with the outside world. So I'll give you an example. Functional, right? When we talked about the different domains, from a functional point of view, someone with a mental illness might not have ever, they might have been taken care of by a family and might not have ever taken a BST bus on their own to come from point A to point B. What happens in a residential facility is that that opportunity is not available because they don't have to. That's not a part of their everyday life in a residential facility. But there is here an opportunity, and we've had umpteen clients who started off needing attendance and needing to be accompanied and brought to the center and also taken back home, who now today take trains, buses, sometimes multiple modes of public transport just to come to the center and go home. So that is a massive opportunity because it's not just about knowing where the bus stop is and which bus number I have to take. It's also about engaging. It's about saying, okay, I need to buy a ticket or I need to deal with the other things that go on in my environment at that time. There is a lot of subtle as well as a lot of overt engagement taking place in that space where and this whole process is supported, is guided. So if a client comes to the center and they're looking very harassed or they're looking very tired or they're stressed out because of their commute, that is something that is again addressed. It is something that they're supported through. It's something that they're helped with, not in a way to say, okay, you can't then make this on your own. Please don't come on your own tomorrow, unless, of course, there is, if, for example, if a client is symptomatic, right, and it's dangerous in any way, then of course we would involve the caregiver and say, this is for now, put it on, independent traveling, put it on hold. But otherwise, it's more a question of,
Enabling.
independence, learning how to, yeah.
I sort of
But I
relate
would
this
add,
completely.
sorry,
Yeah.
Here
Sorry,
I
Meenaji.
would add, because I've experienced as a caregiver, I did realize she used to be fully dependent on personal car, going, dropping, and coming back. Lately, gradually, she understood, and we have also motivated her, supported her using train and then go to certain destination or the center, which she was using for a long time, this train, and then handling a train pass, which day it is uh, getting over, and when she has to make a new pass, and lot of things, if she has to take a taxi from certain spot, then how she has to do all that she's learned. In other sense, I would say it is building a insight, thinking that now I have to manage. They have been doing helping, but I have to also manage. I have to learn to manage certain things. So rehab helps or support them to rebuild a thinking power, insight development, and they capacity building also increase. Or many other things, does come out after the rehab support. So psychosocial support and general rehab center, residential, there is a vast difference. They are always connected to family and society and then doing rehab. Whereas in residential home, they are only secluded. Once in a while, the family comes and meet and go away. So they're not connected with anybody, fully disconnected.
Very beautifully explained, Meena ji and Binaifer ji. And I completely related to what you all were saying, because even when I started with my son, initially I would go, to work. I would go and drop him by my car. And then slowly I moved on to, he started taking the metro and, going to work, booking the ticket on the metro. I taught him how to use the GPay and, things like that. I completely get the point, how different it is from a residential rehab to what you guys are.
Yeah. And residential rehabilitation has its place. It's not that it's useless. I mean, now, especially when we see we have quite a few destitute clients. We have quite a few clients who actually live on the street. They are street dwellers and they come to the center because they have a mental illness. We provide them with a lot of other support that they also need in order to come back the next day. But for people who, are in an acute sort of state and their symptoms are very, very florid, for them to be able to do this independently, not only on their own, but also without any kind of support and facing multiple challenges, right? आज मैं यहाँ सो रहा था, अभी मैं आया वापस तो मेरा मेरा बिस्तरा यहाँ से चले गया, मेरा सामान यहाँ नहीं है, मैं 4 दिन से नहाया नहीं है, मेरा पैसा चोरी हो गया, मैंने खाना नहीं खाया, दवाई गुम गया. So you have all the multiple challenges, and that especially for this population, which is vast, I think residential rehabilitation is a huge requirement. And then we also have people who may not fall in that, category, but are for other reasons, for a particular, let's say, period of time, residential rehabilitation is very helpful. But there's, I think, the stepping stone to the actual reintegration then becomes very difficult if there is that isolation, because then you're not exposed to what you're trying to reintegrate into.
I get the picture completely, and I completely understand. So, how does a day look like for a person in your center? When he comes from 9 o'clock, to their place till, I don't know, till 5, 6, whatever time is there. How does the day look like? And what is your view in terms of how do you engage the person, to ensure that this structured rehabilitation, is going from, it's scaling up basically from, to whatever levels you are looking, so that there is inclusion into the society and he's moving ahead.
So the day at the center typically, so we have Monday to Friday is the week for the clients. And typically what happens is that they have the person the client comes in at about, say, 9:30. So 9:30, the clients are expected to come in between 9:30 and 9:45. And they start their day with some sort of physical exercise. So at times it's walking, sometimes it's, yoga exercises, at times it's other kind of Zumba or, some sort of aerobics. So there's just so that, it's kept interesting and fresh. We have different exercises. And then we have what we call daily living skills. Daily living skills are skills that each individual client opts to do. So there is a list of day-to-day tasks that require to be done. From going to the market and buying vegetables, to bringing the milk that is required for the chai, to making the chai, to doing the dusting, to doing the sweeping and the pota, to doing the washing of the cups, to make the salad because we have a kitchen. So to making, sort of preparing some of the components that go into that day's lunch, to various kind of these day-to-day activities, which we feel are extremely important for our clients to become not just familiar with, but become very comfortable doing, because we are working with an adult population. And at some point, it is very possible that these clients will need to some level be able to have to stand on their own feet. So this is what daily living skills is about, is to develop that functional independence. And then the actual group sessions start from about 11 o'clock. So 11 to 12 and then 12 to 1 are the group sessions. Sometimes, depending on the session, of course, the timing is different. We have lunch from 1 to 2. Lunch is also structured in a way where, a group of clients will sit at, there's several independent tables, and everyone is sort of, chooses where they want to sit. And everyone's, there are certain, I don't like to use that term, but it is what it is, do's and don'ts, in the sense that wait till everyone's plate is open or everyone's dabba is open. Wait till everyone's khana comes. Start eating together. Wait for someone else to finish sharing, not just taking, but also offering. So there are some of these things that we make sure that lunch is not something that's happening in sort of, it's just lunch. We're there, we're present, we're engaging with the clients. There's a lot of chit chat. There's sometimes, different kinds of chit chat. So there is basically what one would expect at a dinner table at home, right? And a lot of our clients, eating together with others is not something that they have or they do experience at home. So there is, I think, that loss is something that they then are able to, the loss of that is regained through this process, because of course, the family also gets more and more sensitized as the process proceeds. And then we have again at 2 o'clock sessions from 2 to 4. And around 4 o'clock, we have a kind of a wind down. Of course, there's chai nashta, let me not forget, in the morning as well as in the evening. And everyone, again, it's the clients who make the chai. So they have to count how many people they are. They have to say, okay, who can't have sugar? Who has only without milk? So what I'm saying is the brain has to, is being challenged and is being made to work even in these tasks. And then there's a wind down, what we call like a sort of a wind down of the day, where everyone sits in some silence and sort of goes through the events of the day and closes the day for themselves. And then they go home, and then it's repeat.
back to again the next day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what a day looks like. During the course of the day, of course, family sessions happen, individual one-on-one counseling sessions happen. A lot of our group therapies also happen on a one-to-one basis. So we work out a schedule where, everyone's getting the maximum benefit and no one's missing out on anything that's very significant or important to them.
About vocational skill sets to be, upskilled or things like that?
So we have a vocational rehabilitation program, which is called Swayam. It is currently dormant. It hasn't revived since the lockdown, since the pandemic. What happened during the pandemic, actually, we had a massive sort of churning of actual clients, and as well as, I think we were faced with different kinds of challenges. So even during the lockdown, as Meena rightly said, we didn't shut shop at all. So for those 2 years, we developed what was called a digital rehabilitation program because that's the best we could do. And in the course of this digital rehabilitation program, we raised money to make sure that everyone had smartphones, network, internet was provided, and training. So we had to identify volunteers, especially for the senior clients who most of them lived on their own. We had to identify people from nearby localities when that became possible to help them learn how to use so it could be a neighbor, it could be some other caregiver who lives close by. So we identified these resources that were there in the community, and they were sort of encouraged to use, Zoom. And I think all of us, I learned how to use Zoom in the lockdown. So, like that, I think, the digital program also kept going. We also had for people who were not getting accustomed or just were not able to receive that kind of support, we had just telephone, but we were in touch with every client every single day. So, what happened as a result of that is that families and caregivers also got very involved because your loved one was at home with you. You had to make it work, right? And making it work meant, I think, because of the intensity of the circumstances during the lockdown, a lot of responsibility that would not have normally been given to that person was then shared with that person. Okay, now you have to do this every day, right? Whatever it is. In a sort of unexpected way, a lot of the clients developed a very, very, high level of independence because of that. So a big chunk of our clients really didn't need to come back to the center on a full-time basis once we opened up. So they were coming just a couple of days a week, continuing to do what they had started to do during the lockdown at home. And our clientele right now is almost, except maybe a handful, totally a different group of people. So it's a whole lot of new people who, we did not, who were not part of Manav prior to the lockdown, and people who were part of Manav prior to the lockdown have now sort of moved on and progressed in different ways. So what has happened is that our Swayam program, I know that's where I started and then I rambled, but the Swayam program is a program for people who have achieved a certain level of psychosocial rehabilitation and then are able to participate in the vocational rehabilitation program. So Swayam is where a lot of soft skills are. It's about a 7 to 8 month module where soft skill training is developed. So we talk about, all the soft skills, interpersonal interaction. We talk about teamwork. We talk about time management. We talk about conflict resolution. We talk about, professionalism, how to deal with pressure. These are the kind of modules that we focus on mainly in Swayam. But in order to actually engage and have that translate into specific internships, which we also try and source from the larger community, psychosocial rehabilitation is required. So there's a certain level of stability that one needs to be able to successfully participate in Swayam and then find their way out. So we don't have that group yet for Swayam.
Okay. So it's like a step,
Yes,
steps
yes,
which you have
yes.
built in. That's
And
amazing.
it may sound a little sort of, to a lot of people listening, it may sound, but okay, we were done with the pandemic in 22. We are in 26. I mean, there's 4 years. You mean to say in 4 years you haven't been able to get a group of people together? And I think that that's important to point out, that that's the nature of this process,
Yeah.
is that it's not linear, it's not one way. You don't press an on button and zoom ahead. There's a lot of back and forth. A lot depends on the environment. A lot depends on the family's involvement, how supportive, how enabling the family is or not. And a lot depends on how long the person has also been ill for prior to
Coming
coming
to
into
mind.
rehabilitation. So, yes, rehabilitation is sometimes agonizing slow, but it is, in my understanding, once achieved, it's authentic, it's sustainable, and it's something that doesn't sort of, you know, switch on and off.
Yeah.
It, yeah,
It's something which, as a caregiver, something which I've completely learned is patience is the key to
yes,
the healing, and I
absolutely.
completely believe that, so I understand from for the point which you were trying to make.
Right,
And you were
right.
talking about families, ma'am, is how much of involvement actually families take part in this? That would be my next
Here,
question.
here I would say, from the previous question and this related answer which Binaifer gave, see the example what we do as in Manav's team and what is happening at home, both way connected. So as in caregiver, as in Manav's team, both way I have my experience differently. Well, there is, I see that she's involved in activity. There is, of course, ups and downs, in and out of Manav. And then, she's been doing a job in between, traveling independently. And for quite some time, she did the job. When relapse happened again, it taken a back seat. So when relapse happened after that, again, come back, doing the same thing. And relapse is something, is also, I would like to talk about relapse first. Relapse is always not bad, I would say, because, it relapse something, the client understand, oh, this has happened. If I don't do this, the consequences they will start understanding. Again I will be hospitalized, again this medication will increase, or again I have to go for a doctor and ECT if required, all these things, it make them think. So this relapse also one of the way to make them realize, if you don't do so and so, this consequences will be there. So one major thing they learn through this. And also they understand that for that, apart from this, we have to do certain activities may, once they start understanding the activity part, how they feel happy, how they laugh, how they smile when the group of people make some joke or read something or talk something. And socializing, there are many things where they start learning. Thinking everybody wants to get married, but marriage is not the end of solution. It's the beginning of some other journey, which may be a factor of again some trigger, or maybe, or minimal point, it can be a solution for some people who are in a different zone or not. So this is very, you can say a very different experience and different learning for clients or our loved ones. But insight development is the major thing which they learn through this. And the activity at home, what we observe and what we motivate her to do, getting up in time, go for exercise, Zoom, the exercise is compulsory, whichever swimming, gym, or walk, or anything, you have to do that. So, then when we say the dopamine works in its own way, the same thing. So now they do, get tired, and the nervous system does get released, and they, get a better sleep. Of course, sleep is also a big recovery area, or support them for recovery. And understanding consequences, as I told you, for decision making also it helps in other areas. The same way, like if I'm alone, I have to make tea for me. Otherwise, who will do? Sometimes they are, at least sometimes they are alone at home, and those who are already alone at home, they have to do, which we teach, from the basics, very basic. Though, I would say, the back of 2004, when we were planning, I had a big list of things, what activity we can do. So many activities I had in my mind. But everything is not rehab. But at least now what I see is everything in a different way is a help for the rehabilitation. Talking to people, making people, meeting people, going alone with somebody or going in a group, what difference does it make? When you are in a family, sitting with everybody for dinner, what is the difference? When you're sitting alone and eating, what is the difference? These are the area we, if they do or they don't do, but we try and motivate them to do such things.
But how do you motivate the family to take it forward? Or
Because in a family session, we make it a point from MANAV, each caregiver must attend a family session.
okay.
So the family is involved, they understand do's and don'ts.
Okay.
Do's and don'ts is teaches them, the caregiver from the day one there, it is something for everybody. The caregivers start learning after they realized or doctor said he or she is going through so and so issue, mental health issue. So mental health issue is mental sickness, they have to deal with it. So they're saying do's and don'ts from day one, they have to start thinking. First thing, so it's for them, for me especially, it was a big trauma. For me, it was first hospitalization. I was feeling every day sitting in Masina's garden, I was feeling my baby has gone out from my hands. It was that kind of feeling I was developing. So, but gradually, one day I wiped my tears, no more crying. I have to do something what I can do. And that positivity made me do many things.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the understanding and that spirit of taking forward, doing it, I think that's amazing.
And one more thing helped me on a caregiver point of view, I would say the hobby. I was just doing various things while she was in hospital because it was a complete loss for me.
Yeah.
So one fine day, I found my stamp collection, that diary, and I was trying to go through and I started assembling that. It took more than 25 or 1 month time to assemble everything. But end of the day, I felt, oh my God, I'm feeling fully relaxed. It's a stress buster for me. So can you imagine if caregiver understand this, if they do certain activity which help them to do, feel better, whether it's a hobby or some other thing, meeting people, going for, some other work or outing, it's a caregiver do need some kind of relief. Then
And I
only.
think to add to that, I think is also so when we talk about our, from our perspective, from a professional, so to speak, which we know is frankly speaking, um, maybe it plays a role not only in enabling the caregiver to become um, not just not just to engage, but to engage in a way that is that contributes to the recovery. But in order to do that, the care of the caregiver is what is really important. So we provide not just the do's and don'ts, not just about, this is how you should talk, this is not how you should talk, but the caregiver receives a lot of support from us as well for their own issues. We understand that caregivers' lives, like Meena rightly said, actually come to a stop because they don't have, as you, of course, also rightly know, the bandwidth or the capacity at the end of the day to think about themselves or to take care of themselves. Providing that support, providing that space for the caregiver is actually step one. Then we talk about, okay, you know, now how do you feel you can participate and what do you need to do to ensure that the burden of caregiving is at least lightened, if not entirely taken off your hands. So, to some level, to some degree, you're able to live your life as well. And to whatever extent is possible, we really push for the optimal independence here at MANAV so that it's not just a question of the individual client's independence and the quality of their life that changes. It's also important to address the quality of the life of the caregiver because they both go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. And in order for that to actually translate into everyday reality, right, a lot of support is needed.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of caregivers, especially, I would say, in my opinion, but not limited to mothers, where there is sort of an automatic taking on of, decision making, of supporting, of actual, day-to-day caregiving, which leaves one with no time, energy, or even the will to do anything beyond that. Right? I mean, both you and Meena, I'm sure, are well aware of what it takes. So, my point is, we're not there only for the client. We are there for the caregiver because we recognize that their own well-being, which has been put on hold, has to sort of resume for the rehabilitation to actually be successful and be a win-win for everyone.
Yeah. It's a team game, I always
Yeah,
believe
absolutely.
that.
Like the title of today's chat.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll hand it over to Sachin, Dr. Sachin, to ask the further questions.
Yeah, thank you, Saraswati. Thank you, ma'am. I think that was a very enlightening conversation. And I think just to sum up, I think even if the caregivers get some respite, and I think they can lead their own lives with the kind of initiatives you're doing and the kind of pain and the journey which you have been through, I think that's a great learning for all of us when we are listening to you today. So thank you very much. Just to take it forward, we just want to understand what are the biggest barriers for reintegration into the society.
Meena, would you like to
Sorry.
share the struggles you've seen when reintegration? What do you feel are the issues that?
Can you elaborate more what exactly you're looking for, doctor?
Yeah. So I think you mentioned about residential centers, daycare centers, and there are families, and we have caregivers, and there are individuals who live with the illness. So, what do you see? Which are the biggest barriers which the society has to overcome to for this entire teamwork to happen? So, it could be, I think, personal barriers. It could be structural barriers. It could be financial barriers. So, I think what, based on your experience over the last 20 years, would you feel are the biggest barriers? It could be societal stigma. So what are the barriers you think are for people to reintegrate back into the society?
Well, when she was young, I did, came across the close family members, or, not immediate family members, the different people around me has been saying, she had LD and slow learner as a special child. He was saying, don't tell anybody, don't tell anybody. And I've been like listening, and I was doing what I had to do. I was not, answerable to them. But when she grew up with different issues and reached mental illness, and I realized, again, I have the society is society, but family is family, and for me, she is my loved one, and I will do what I have to do. And in other way, I was more bold and open person to talk and to accept things differently than my community people. For them it was a big stigma, but I was being doctor's daughter also. I had certain bringing up, you can say ki one need to be open to doctor, as we say, or their lawyer. So I was like open about everything, and same way my family, immediate family, was very supportive, very supportive. So, throughout, like she's now 45, from the day one, I was going to special school, their OT and PT and other stuff and all. So Neha became a, inspiration for the principal to start a school, special school for the special children. Otherwise, in 81, early 90s, there was nothing available. Counseling word was not existing at that time. Believe me, what was counseling? Nobody knew. But this, I feel, my running around from pillar to post has reached to certain level. It is not documented anywhere, anything. But each family members work and demand and asking and telling and query about different things does reach to some level. And reaching at Manav is my journey. May I know how it has paid to so many people. In childhood, though, the special children was also a stigma. Today, mental illness is stigma. That time also, I had created a group for, that special children's parents. That was child reach, and I was big active person in that. School, I was very active. But all these things, in spite of having stigma, I was fighting for it. I was taking many more children in my car, driving down to different TV shows and drama show, to give her a exposure. If I help other children, she will also get exposure. Yeah, different hurdles I faced, but then I have overcome. Stigma today is also there, but people around me, I asked for one person, and four came out. So if we break the barrier, people does come forward. So loved one, do understand if you open up. If you hide, people will not talk to you. Saying doesn't want to talk, leave it. How we behave in counseling also. Let's handle, step by step. If he or she is open up to certain extent, talk only that much. We'll see in next session. Same with people also, society also. So if we open up, we do get support. And I boldly say, I face the things, and I have enough support, big support of society, big support of family, extended family, everybody. And people comes to me, I'm not professional, comes to me for guidance, for suggestion, to advise what to do, where to go. And this is my policy from the day one, even for the Jaipur Food Center, I said, or for this Manav also. If anybody comes to your door, even if it is not your preview, guide them where to go. We are dealing with mental illness, but if somebody come with addiction issue or Alzheimer issue, we have all the moral duty to guide them to where to go. So, this is what the sensitivity develops in both. So the stigma if we don't try to remove stigma, who will do? General public have no, business to do that. So this is what.
Yeah, I think, but also the point is that just to carry on with this point of yours, Meena, is that I feel that it is, I think, a responsibility that is society's. Yes, there are some people who will take the lead because perhaps they are affected or impacted more directly. But we cannot at any point say that, mental health or mental illness is not everybody's business. It is. Because it has no, as everybody knows, it doesn't matter who you're born to, it doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter where you live or what car you drive. If there is mental illness, it's a leveled playing ground over there. And I think that the stigma leads to, I think, this a very deeply embedded, I think, demarcation, a segregation, us and them. And I think that it's very subtle, but it's still very strong. And I think that finds translation in terms of how we keep people with mental illness at bay. And I think that's a barrier to being able to accept mental illness as an illness. It's not the person, it's not something they're doing. And I think, as simplistic as it may sound, I think that, that very basic perspective that people hold, but people who are, mentally, you hear it in, people may not use now because everyone's very conscious of being politically correct. So you may not hear those kind of words that are being used, that were very common a few years ago. But it's still there, it's still present. And I think that if that barrier between us and them, right, can just be sort of, it's like offering society and everyone who's part of society an opportunity to just shift your perspective, because a lot of people don't know everything that we're talking about. That, people with mental illness are not necessarily, separate or different or have to be handled or managed. There are um, a lot of such shifts when you see today in other issues, right? Other intellectual disabilities, where there is also a lot of, where you would say, physical disabilities, developmental disabilities. You see that there is a lot more acceptance, because I think there has been a lot of exposure to that. And of course, there's a long way to go, but I feel that kind of, yep, it's a fact of life. Just like people have heart problems and people have, cancers, people have mental illnesses as well. And I think that sort of normalization, right, of mental illness or any kind of mental health issue that interferes with one's ability to be like the rest of the world, that is something that I feel is yet the biggest barrier. So I feel that if broken, I think it would open a gateway to, just a more inclusive, a more, not just more inclusive, but an entirely inclusive fabric that doesn't separate them from us.
Here, I would say something ki, how the awareness has increased. But people do need sometimes a different way. कान यहाँ से पकड़ो या वहाँ से पकड़ो वाली बात होती है ना. So one place I was involved in some club to talk on mental health and some other my social work. I decided to talk on mental health, not mental illness. We understand the difference. As in professional, everybody understand. Certain caregiver also, everybody understand. But people, those who are layman, for them is mental illness. Oh, dur, like get away from that. But I have explained them in such a manner that you as a human being need to be fit. If this is not working, आप पूरे दिन परफॉर्म ही कैसे करोगे आपके ऑफिस में? घर में झगड़ा हुआ, कुछ हुआ, or something happened somewhere, you take out your anger somewhere, you take out, something will, or you're not very productive. So these things made them realize, maybe I tried in an experimental way, but it has reached to their heart. And also after it got over, a few people called me searching my number, and madam, Didi, please guide me, what should I do, where should I go? So this has it affect, if affected many people, it has made them realize mental illness and difference of mental health. So if mental health is fine, there will not be a illness. See, chronic, that chemical reaction and that illness is, sometimes it can happen to anybody, but at least we can try and keep the healthy environment. That was my, focused area ki, let them understand through this way, through this channel. That's
No, ma'am. Well said. I think both of you. I think it. I think Meena ma'am spoke about. I think it starts with us. And Binaifer ma'am also said that I think society also needs to change, like what they did with leprosy and tuberculosis. So I think that also, and that subtle differentiation is still there, which is quite true. So I think all these barriers would need to be taken off to see that people reintegrate back in the society. Just to take
Yeah.
forward based on your experiences.
Yeah, can I just add one more thing,
Yeah,
doctor,
yeah,
for
yeah,
that?
please, yeah,
Just one
yeah.
more thing. Um, I think again, it's another way of saying the same thing, but I think it's just that I think, expect as a society that people who are living with mental illness need to adjust to society. Whereas society, in my understanding, needs to make room, needs to create space, right? And be able to absorb people with mental illness or who are recovering from mental illness back into the space, because the space belongs, according to me, to everyone and should not be, you know exclusive. So yeah, that was just one more thing I wanted to add.
No, no, absolutely true. I think that the kind of conditioning which the society has about normality and
Yeah.
what people suffer when they have an illness, I think there is no space for them to actually recover and then get back. So I think absolutely true. I think there's no doubt about it that I think the conditioning of the society has to change about what is normal and what is abnormal. Absolutely true. So based on your experiences till now, since so many years, what would be your vision for the future of rehab in India? And in case you want to scale up this work which you're doing, what would you think would be the best way to scale it up? And what could be the vision of rehab based on whatever you've understood of caregivers, people who live with mental illness, what you've seen with others, and your own personal journeys?
I think this is something that I'm sure, Meena and all other caregivers also have a vision for what they feel, how mental illness and its treatment, needs to be down the road and what is missing. And I think that based on what we've seen over the years, there's been a sort of a very vast difference when people with mental illness, with severe mental illness, have been treated purely by medication or other clinical interventions, and people who have participated in a psychosocial rehabilitation process. I think psychosocial rehabilitation, just like we have, medication, just like we have from time to time when hospitalization is required, I think we talk about counseling, we talk about other psychotherapies. I think psychosocial rehabilitation really needs now, it's time for it to be incorporated formally into treatment programs. And I feel that even though there is always a time and place for rehabilitation, in the sense that not everyone, because it has to be voluntary. So it is part of a much, longer process. It has to be a part of that process, though. It cannot work on its own, and neither can any of the other components that are being practiced today from clinical points of view, also be successful by themselves. And I think there are, in terms of, what is required today that is missing is, for example, the residential facility, right? There is a need for people who don't have anywhere to go for various reasons to have the right to their treatment. And if the right to their treatment means providing them with shelter, then that is something that I think is, I think it's a growing requirement in our society. Also, when we talk about, institutionalization, again, there's a role institutionalization plays, but the role it plays, I think, is again something that needs to be more enabled, let's say, with the concept of like a halfway home. So you have people who have been institutionalized for prolonged periods of time. हाँ अभी तो ठीक है, लेके जाओ. When that happens and लेके जाते हैं, there is a massive gap for that person to be able to just, it's not like you just walk back into everyday life. It's not even doable for the family or the caregivers or the people who have been sort of disconnected to suddenly sort of absorb this new person, right, back into everyday living. So halfway homes play a very important role in, I think, ensuring that recovery is sustained, which is basically that family gets an opportunity to understand what is needed and how things have changed. And the person doesn't walk into like this, environment, perhaps, which has, which is very possibly full of different various triggers, and expected to sort of just assimilate and become a part of that environment. So I think there is the halfway homes play a very important role in the case of, long-term institutionalized, perhaps, care. And you see this very often, for example, when we talk to a lot of families who have readmitted their loved ones back into an institution. Their main concern is, but when she comes home or when he comes home, everything goes back to what it used to be. And I think that this process is something that really is being overlooked. And, it is something that needs, again, more attention. And of course, like I said, many, many more centers that focus on psychosocial rehabilitation, many more that, we'd be happy to open if we had the resources. I mean, not to say that we haven't tried, we've tried, but um, things haven't necessarily gone our way as yet. We're not going to give up anytime soon. So I do see that there are very many different missing links that we need to sort of fill those gaps for mental illness really to become mainstream as an issue itself. Its treatment needs to be more mainstream. Like, sometimes when you just use the word psychiatrist, there's a bit of a pause. Oh, psychiatrist. So again, for that, like we said, to cover those bases, and of course, a lot more psychosocial rehabilitation in whatever shape and form for that kind of inclusive fabric that I think we're all looking for.
Thank you, ma'am. Meena, ma'am, anything from any inputs from your side?
Yes, as also I would repeat, as she rightly said, halfway home. See, we see I'll end up like this, ki residential home, what we see, and the hospitalization, particularly government and private, it has its own way of running the system. Government has limited capacity to deal with it, or there is a less focus on mental health area also. That is one major part. Disability, though it has included in a disability area, but practically it is far away. So, since the government hospital has a norm or a policy, if you admit a patient, the caregiver has to be with him, with the person. Whereas in that case, if it is not available, it is forcibly admitted, then the sedative is more important in a treatment than the rehab or a recovery process. Whereas in private hospitalization, the finance part is such a major burden to families, which is sometimes beyond capacity. So many times they are taken aback what to do, how to go about it, and what I can do. There are many questions in mind and they can't deal with it and they're forcibly do. So in that process, even they get drained out financially, emotionally, physically, in all the ways. So, there is a big question for such families. I have seen the families from rich to middle class to very, very going down towards, I'm seeing from last 10 years, but can't help it. And also halfway home for caregivers, another part, they are struggling day to day. They have nobody to look after, even they want to go out for some emergency for one day also. So in half day home should be such a model where for 2 days or a week, they can be taken care of medically, physically, and safety version. So that way they are secured about, and there is a change also for a caregiver. So that way go. Also, I feel that caregivers should also take self-care first. Oxygen analogy, I would always say, ki if you take care of yourself, take oxygen, then take care of your child. If you can't do that, how will you, take care of your family members? So that is one thing they should do. Another thing, they should also inculcate some hobby or some activity which give them relief. This is my experience. My stamp collection hobby has become such a passion for me that I participate in international exhibitions and won various medals, and it is productive. It is very productive. So hobby can be productive. Sometimes it's returns of finance also for some people, some hobby, but not every hobby. But they should have some hobby. Well, mental care, health care is not a charity, it's a dignity. We have to treat with dignity, I would say. And we are committed to keeping that promise alive through MANAV Foundation. That's what I say.
Oh, wonderful. I think that's really nice, and totally agree that I think self-care is important, and I think some respite of caregivers get in terms of physical support, financial support, emotional support. I think that will go a long way in whatever formats, whether it's a daycare center, rehab home, a halfway home, or a way people get reintegrated back in the society. I think it was wonderful actually listening to you. In the end, if listeners just want to remember one thing from this conversation, what would you want it to be? What would be your one takeaway based on your immense amount of experience which you have been through and which you have shared today?
Well, I would say कि this is a lifelong journey for the caregiver, and as long as we can deal or handle it, openly, with wholeheartedly, and with the inclusion of other family members, we should try and keeps going on. Also takes the break in between the family members, or whichever way possible. Each family pattern is different, so whichever way is possible one should try. Also the finance and majorly emotional arrangement, they should do it for their loved ones for future, because फाइनेंस पार्ट एवरीबडी थिंक्स उसका ये अरेंजमेंट कर देंगे हो जाएगा, बट जब तक इमोशनल केयरिंग नहीं होएगा फाइनेंस विल remain aside. So emotional care will give a more importance for every family member. Making a trust is one thing. Legally, there are legal aspect, which is many areas which they need to work. Legal guardians, trust making, and also, as in through your media, I would like to say, the relief for the insurance policy is the major part family faces. So over there, though there is a rule, but practically it is not happening. So then more and more we have to talk about insurance. That is one financial support. If family gets, there is a less burden on family. The burden reduces, so their productivity or support system, or indulgent in the recovery of loved ones will be better.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. Anything from your side, Binaifer, ma'am?
I think what I'd like to sort of say to everyone, whether you're someone directly or indirectly impacted by any kind of mental issue, I think it's important for everyone to understand that mental illness doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world. It is not the end of your world. There is much more available today than there was, and we're hoping that there will continue to be more and more available. But even with where we're at right now, it is not the end of the world. It is something that can very certainly be addressed, be treated, and you will see positive outcomes. It's just the opportunity has to be taken, and more opportunity, I think, has to be made.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I think, and thank you, Meena ma'am, Binaifer ma'am, for your wonderful insights and the kind of detailed and very articulate conversation and of the journey which you have been through. Thank you, Saraswati. Thank you all for your time.
This book, Spark Within You, are stories curated by Meena Mutha and MANAV Foundation. It is available on Amazon.